fire in particular as a management tool that humans use specifically to encourage edibles that they wanted to see proliferate in the landscape. And why we want to particularly understand what the American Indian management techniques were for the eastern seaboard is because those become relevant for our design since we're designing in that landscape. And in general, in any landscape we're doing designs, we want to do our homework on what were traditional land management techniques that predated European colonization that we may want to revitalize. For instance, the Incas and a lot of the terraces and their irrigation systems are now being brought back into production because traditional cultures who lived there realized, hey, all we need to do is a little bit of messing with this and with that, and this whole thing will be back in working order. And that's been happening to a bunch of abandoned ancient sites. Another one is, one of my favorites is Tiahuanaco in Bolivia by Lake Titicaca. I have never been there, but I've read a ton about it, and it's a very intriguing site. The Tiahuanaco predates the Incas and was built by the Aymara. And the Aymara are the civilization that then the Incas built all of their capitals on where the Aymara had been. The Aymara were definitely a well-designed civilization. What it looks like happened to them is similar to what happened to the Anasazi Indians in the southwestern desert of the U.S., which is a 40-year drought. Pretty much no matter how well-designed your culture is, it's tough to weather a 40-year drought and make it through the other side with any sort of cultural stability. So generally what happened, both in the Anasazi in the southwestern desert, the cliff dwellers, Canyon de Chelly, Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, those are all built by people who today, the present tribes, say they have no idea who those people were. Like, I don't know who they are. We call them Anasazi. Sort of the ancient ones, the elders, could have been aliens. We don't know who they were. That's what the Navajo and the Zuni and the Hopi say today about who built the cliff dwellings, is they don't really draw a direct lineage connection to the people, to the Anasazi. So the Anasazi and the Aymara both splintered as cultures because of 40-year droughts. So they built these great cities and had great highway systems connecting with awesome gardens that were well designed. And then this 40-year drought caused them to tribalize is classically what happens when a culture disintegrates, is that things go back to tribal village-based cultures and people move away from the place where the drought is and go to places that are relatively adjacent and start back at village-based cultural paradigms. And so it fragments something that was more of a cohesive whole. So the Aymara around Lake Titicaca were doing some amazing things with on-contour terraces around the lake itself and using the lake as a microclimate to extend their growing season, in particular for potatoes, which there are several hundred varieties of potatoes in that culture. That's the culture that originally domesticated the potato, which is also a very interesting story because the potato is inherently poisonous, just like the almond. They're two of the most interesting food crops to look at the history of the genetics behind, because it's actually fairly mystifying even for modern botanists to be able to figure out how did people actually create an edible version of an almond? How did they actually create an edible version of a Solanaceae potato? So it's a nightshade, most of its wild relatives are deadly, and there is very specific genetic hybridizing and blending of different varieties that was done by the Aymara to create this first staple food crop for the Americas of the potato. So potato is one that I definitely recommend looking into some of the history of. It's interesting, it's definitely mysterious. There's a lot of people theorizing that perhaps even aliens taught them how to do it. You know? It's one of those things, it's so funny how... It's all these things where, like, in Western modern technological society, we're always baffled that people were actually smarter than us at some time before us. How could that be? They actually know